Hi, welcome to Crafty Studio. My name is AnnMarie, and in today's lesson we're going to be making the summer Irish chain. Now this is a traditional pattern. You may have seen this in a few different designs or different designers, or possibly on a quilt from a long time ago, a vintage quilt. It's a pattern that's been handed down generation to generation, but in this pattern, instead of taking tiny little pieces, which is what they would have done traditionally to use up fabrics, what we're going to do is we're going to do a thing called strip piecing, and strip piecing will make this quilt come together so quickly. You'll have all your blocks ready to go in absolutely no time. So if you follow along step by step in the next parts of the video, and I'll show you how to strip piece your Irish chain quilt together. For our patchwork parcel, we have some 2.5-inch jelly strips cut, or strips that are cut 2.5-inch wide and the width of fabric. And then we also have our background fabric, which is a lacquer print. But if you look at these absolutely gorgeous summer prints, we have blenders. There's a small volume print and then a large volume print, and a mix and match of colours on these beautiful spring tones. So our background fabric is a lacquer print, and basically what that means is it's a white on white. Now you can get them in cream on cream and other colours, but it basically means that the pattern is very low volume, so it disappears into the background. And you can see here there's a small floral print on this one. It depends on which box you have. You may have a different one. So we're going to take, these are all pre-cut and we don't need them for the moment, so we're just going to take those and put them to one side, and then we're going to cut our background strips. So then we take our background fabric and we need to give that a good press. Make sure you get rid of the crease that's in it from when it's been on the bolt. I've done that here already. And then we're going to cut 6.5-inch strips from this width of fabric, yardage or meterage. Now most rulers are 6-inch wide. This one's a 6-inch wide ruler, and in that case I would use my background and my cutting mat, or if you have a stripology ruler, which I have here, or a larger ruler, you could use those together. So this is a 12.5-inch ruler, so I could use that, or this is a stripology ruler and it goes up to 12 inches, so I can use that. So first of all we just line up our fabric, and I folded it over twice because my ruler, the size of my ruler, determines how wide I can cut. If you're using a 24-inch ruler, you could do half folds. This is double folded, so I'm just lining it up there and making sure that my selvage and my fold are correct together. So the next thing is to get my ruler. This is a stripology ruler, and you can see it has these little slots all the way along. It's great for cutting large amounts of the same size of pieces. Now I do have my 12.5-inch ruler, which that is an option too. Or you can use your cutting mat behind, because most rulers are actually only 6 inches wide and we need 6.5-inch strips. So first of all I'm going to use a stripology ruler. I'm going to take my stripology ruler and I'm going to tidy up the end. So you can see those horizontal lines. I want to make sure they are along my my fold line, and then also along with the selvage. You can see those lines there. So we're just going to line those up, and then the first cut will be on 0. So you can see the marks down the end. So I'm going to line that up perfectly and then cut that 0 line. This is going to true up my my fabric, and then the next cut will be on 6.5. So I just look along the edge to where it has 6.5, and then I cut in that slot on my slotted ruler. So that's 6.5. And this is a really convenient way to cut lots of fabric without having to move too much. So that's my first 6.5-inch strip cut, and then I just continue on in that way. In total you're going to need 6 of these strips, although only 5 of them will be completely cut. You'll get 1 square out of the 6th one, and then your strips for your sashing, and that's all written in the pattern as well. So I'll just continue on cutting these and then show you the next step. Next step is to actually cut our 6.5 inch squares. So I'm just truing up the end of one of my 6.5 inch strips, and then on my ruler, which happens to be a 6.5 inch ruler, ignore that tape that's on it because that's from cutting something else smaller. I have a 6.5 inch square there perfectly. So you just line up with top and bottom once it's trued up. Now I always start on the selvage end, and then what happens at the end, you've got a small piece which is usable. If you do it the opposite way around, you end up with two little skinny pieces, and that's no good at all. They just end up in the scrap bin. So we have this piece, two pieces that are usable for another project. So then we have our 6.5 inch. Should get 6 of those from one strip piece, and we need 31 in total as per our pattern. And you just continue on like that until you have enough of those. Now the next step is to cut the 2.5 inch strips from our backing fabric. And you can look at your pattern to see how many you're going to need of those, but it's the same method as cutting the strips, 6.5 inch strips that we had from our fabric. I'm going to use the strip cutter just because it's quicker. If you do have a 12.5 inch ruler, that's fine to use as well. So I'm just lining this up here again. Now my edge is already nice and trued up, so I don't need to fix that. And I'm going to just find the 2.5 inch along the bottom, and then I'm going to cut 2.5 inch, and then the next increment will be 5, and then the next with 7.5. And I can do all this without actually moving my ruler, which is great. You just need to really hold down the ruler itself like you would with any other ruler. Then you go along to the next one, cut your 5, and then the next one is 7.5. So I can cut 3 of these strips with this ruler at the one time, 2.5 inch strips. These rulers are actually on, and then they're 10. These rulers are actually on our website if you'd like to purchase one. They're dead handy, and you can see that. There we go, our strips, without actually having to move your ruler, and it just makes it nice and quick and easy. So next step is to get your background fabrics and your printed fabrics. So I'm just going to select 2 of my printed fabrics here, and then 1 piece of background fabric. And this is one of our strip piecing units. We have 2 of these in total. So our background fabric is in the center, and then we have print fabrics either side. So we want to sew those together using our 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we have 3 pieces here, and then we're going to subcut them later on. So I'm just going to cut this now and then show you the next one to do. The next strip piecing unit will have 2 background and 1 printed fabric. So you can choose whichever ones you like. It doesn't really matter because they all get mixed up in the end. So you can see here we've got a background, and then in the center a printed fabric, and we sew those all the way along. Try to go one direction and then back down the other. So I have these all sewn, and now I need to press. So you want to press the white fabric or the background fabric out to the dark or the printed fabric, and that's just to prevent seams showing through. And we're going to do the opposite then on the other strip piecing unit. Now this can be quite tricky because it's quite long, so just take your time while doing this, and you want to do 1 seam at a time. So I'm just pressing that out on one side and then going to the other side and pressing it out. Once you have it pressed, then maybe give it a little steam, and that will help it all hold together. This makes a massive difference to when you're actually assembling all your blocks later on, because they will nest together and you'll get lovely sharp corners. Once you've all the strip piecing 1 and strip piecing 2 units sewn and pressed, the next step then is to subcut them into smaller strips. So what we want to do, this is 1 at a time, but you can also do them layered on top of each other. It makes it much quicker, but that is totally up to you and your level of skill and confidence. I'm going to do it here with just on the single so you can see what I'm doing. So I take a smaller ruler just because it's less cumbersome to actually use, and I'm going to true up. Now you want to just have a look at that edge and the line of the fabric in the center and your seam lines, and use those as your guide as well. So you can put a bit of washi tape down here to help you if you like. That can really help with lessening mistakes, because it's so easy to cut the wrong size, and a little bit of washi tape will just indicate that you're at the right position. So 2.5-inch strips. You can see that using that tape makes it much quicker. So I'm just going to continue on and cut the 2.5-inch strips all the way along all my strip piecing. Just be mindful that every so often you might need to true it up again, and that's just to make sure that they're nice and square. So maybe halfway through, though with a lot of practice you won't need to do this, and if you do make a mistake, don't worry, there's lots of extra fabric. And just to demonstrate, it can actually be more convenient to use the Stripology ruler for this, because they're quite small, these pieces, and it can be a little bit fiddly. So I just line it up again. Now I'm going to line it with the seams rather than the top and bottom, and then just double check my seams. So you get it as accurate as you possibly can, and you cut along that 2.5, then the 5, 7.5 and 10, and continue on. And this just prevents the ruler from slipping, and you might be able to do it a lot faster as well. And you can see here 4 pieces cut very quickly and accurately. So once we have those strips subcut, we will have 2 different types of pieces. We'll have our piece with the print in the center, and then 2 background pieces, and then the pieces with the background in the center and 2 prints on the top and bottom. So you can see that here. So that's going to be the center of our block, and we'll have twice as many of the ones with the prints on top and bottom, and they will go on the left and right hand side, and then the other piece goes into the center, and these will all be sewn together. Now at this stage you might consider how they are actually positioned. So you might want to rotate some of them, you might want to change them around. I don't know about that one because we've got 2 of the same colour, so you want to just mix them up as you go to try and get a pleasing arrangement. Now you can still rotate them then when you're assembling them all together. So I'll just show you a couple of them that I've done with lots of the one that's sewn together and given pressed nicely, and you get this lovely chain effect. And if you look at the back, what I've done is I've pressed those out and the other seams in, and this will help them all nest together nice and neatly. When we're going to piece them all together, what you do is you take a background piece and you alternate them. So our first row would start with a print, then a background, then a print, and then a background, and then the second row starts with a background and then a print, and you can see how these will then chain together. So as per the instructions, you want to piece these together every single row and then work your way down. Now here's my first row all sewn together. So it starts with a print and then a background, and then the next row that will go below it is the opposite. So it starts with a background and then the print or the chain block. So you want to press these down, and you want that seam should go towards the print, because you don't want to see the seam in the white fabric, which you would. And once you have that done, then they will nest together nicely. And you just literally take each row at a time and add them one by one, making sure those seams nest together nicely, and you'll get this lovely chain effect all the way across your quilt. So now that we have all of this assembled, all our blocks lovely chaining together, we need to add our sashing. So the sashing is a strip that goes along the edge here. Now this is wider than the regular width of fabric, so we should have pieced long strips as per the pattern. So we're going to do our sashing. So we take our strips. Now we have 5 strips in total. 2 of them will be the width of fabric and the others will be put together in one long strip. But the first ones we take are with our top and bottom, and we measure them using our long ruler. And you can do this one a little bit easier. So you need to use a tape measure. Basically you take your long ruler and you bring it along, and you're measuring it on the fold. So see, it's on the fold here. You just place it out, and then I'll turn it the other way so I can cut off at the end. So I'm going to measure on this end the length I need and then cut here. So I'll just take my rotary cutter. So I measure it half the length that's on my pattern because it's on the fold, and then I cut here, and this will be ready to attach to the top. And I have a fold mark here, but we're going to mark that later on. That's the half. So for the edge, the sides, they're a little bit longer than the width of fabric, 44 inches. So what we need to do is we need to actually assemble strip pieces. So that's why we had 3 for the 2 sides. And what we do is we take our 2.5 inch strips and we're going to join them together with a straight seam. We're not using the diagonal seam like we would for binding, because there won't be any bulk here, because this is piecing, not binding. It's not going to be folded over. So you can see those on those strips. So these are going to be quite long, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to use a tape measure to measure them out. Now you probably think, well, why can't I just lay them on top of my quilt and use it like that? You might have some stretch in the pieces together, and that wouldn't work. So we take our tape measure and we would measure it out. Now I find sometimes if you lay them on top of each other and fold it over, this can make it more convenient. You can use a ruler, but in this case our strips are a little bit longer than our width of fabric, so we're going to measure them out with the tape measure and then cut them to size. To make sure our sashing is evenly distributed over the size of the quilt, what we're going to do is we're going to find the center point on each of our sashing pieces, and you can pop a little pin in here as well if you can't see the fold, because it's quite tricky if it's on white fabric. So I'm just popping a pin in there so I know what it is. So you just fold those sashing pieces in half and find the center point. This will just help even out our quilt, because if our piecing isn't 100% correct, this sashing will actually square up your quilt. We then take our quilt and find the center point. Now your center point may not be in that middle of the center square, so we'll pop it together, fold it over like we did our sashing pieces. Just fold it in half, and then you can finger press it, or I'm going to just pop a pin in here so that you can see it nice and clearly. So we just take that pin and pop it in. And this really does make a massive difference, and it's worth not skipping this step. And you can see now that pin is just slightly to one side, so it's not exactly in the center, so measuring it with a ruler wouldn't work because we're trying to find the overall center. We take our piece of sashing then, and we're going to line up those pins, or the fold marks, the creases that you have. So I'm going to pin the center, and then I'm going to pin the ends, and then pin all the way in between. Try not to stretch your fabric. You want to have a nice even distribution to help even out your quilt as you go along. And once you have this done, you want to sew it down and then press so that your seam allowance is towards the sashing. So here's our finished quilt. This summer Irish chain. Beautiful traditional pattern with lovely fresh colours, and our white sashing all the way around. You could extend this with a large coloured sashing along the top and sides. You could even add in more blocks if you wanted to, or leave it as is and quilt it and then put some either white or coloured binding on the side. So we hope you enjoyed this patchwork parcel, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.